Welcome to Defen episode number 74. Since we realized that we are falling out of people's interest, and then we thought we are going to bring in much more hipper, cooler people on your podcast. So reignite the interest in Defen, because we are old ass people talking about shit, and then Ray keeps talking about some Victorian shit that nobody understands, and
fuck off.
I'm somewhere in between, immigrant dude talking about some shit that nobody understands. So we want to make sure that the I don't know if Snapchat is a thing these days. I'm not TikTok thing. Yes, the TikTok meme.
The gramophone.
Whatever,
the gramophone is a thing.
Yeah. That's a thing.
Vinyl
That's too
records
advanced
are
for
back
you.
in. Vinyl records. Will probably listens to Streetlight Manifesto on vinyl for all I know.
Anyway, so we decided.
Pumpkin.
Yes, so we decided we're gonna get somebody way more hip, way more cool than us. So this is good. The greatest crossover that you've been waiting for. Please welcome to the episode, Jordan.
Hey, I'm the trendy new dev on the block. I actually thought you were going to say Will when you were talking about
Nah. Look, he's the guest. He knows what he's getting into.
And I was going to be like, oh, no, you're going to be so disappointed.
I know. I thought he was introducing Will, and I was like, oh, this you could lead it. Like, I was engaged, too. Like,
You have to know that the guests are just an after effect. They're just an afterthought as far as we're concerned.
It's like
could come one episode off the next. It's like.
I mean, of course, we first we need to introduce the co-host. Now we're going to introduce the guest. So maybe you can introduce the guest and double down on the Gen Z pandering.
Yeah, millennials, come on, trend us up.
Well, okay, no. So I'm the trendy new dev on the block, but even trendier is Clojure script. So we have somebody that is doing some really. I did not prepare a script. This is not.
Welcome to Defen, everyone.
Welcome to Defen, Will Acton, aka Lilac Town. Yeah.
Okay.
You haven't
Oh
seen
my
the
goodness.
memes? People
Shit,
should know
I clicked
this.
twice.
They should be following the memes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for having me on. This has been quite a journey so far, even in the last 10 minutes that I've been on. So I'm excited to see where the rest
You're
of the hour
already
goes.
regretting.
Regret would be too strong, but getting up there.
We'll get there.
I'm
We'll
kidding.
get there.
It's too early for regret. It's like,
Yeah, but it'll be complete regret if it is just Ray and me. But we have better guests and better host, so co-host. So we're talking about your T-shirt. So yeah, welcome to the Streetlight Manifesto podcast. What is
No.
what is Streetlight Manifesto?
Great. You go to one concert and you get one T-shirt, and suddenly, like, the entire internet is now, knows you by that.
Who is Will? Oh, that
it's-
Streetlight Manifesto fan guy.
yeah, it's the
that
streetlight
guy,
dude.
the ska guy. Great.
The ska guy. Oh
Yeah,
my
the ska
God.
guy.
It's
That's
I
all
wouldn't
over
even
your
rate
Twitter
ska
now,
as,
isn't
like,
it?
Look.
in my top three music genres, but I do love Streetlight Manifesto.
What are your other two?
I played classical music for a long time as when I was growing up, and so when I'm like, it depends on like the time of day, but either I'm in like okay, I've got to like settle down and get into a flow, so I'm gonna do some like classical music, some Bach, Vivaldi, or I'm like, okay, I gotta pump myself up. I gotta hype myself up. I'm on my third cup of coffee and my brain's not turning on. So that's when the Streetlight Manifesto comes in. Gotta get those horns blowing.
Wait, no.
Monkey man.
Any Lindsay
Damn it.
Sterling? I thought you were going to be like, then I get in my flow and I do a crossover like classical dubstep. Lindsay Sterling, here we go. Like, I thought that's where we were going with it.
I mean, I think
maybe
our
I should check
audience
that
are
out
like,
after this.
Oh, you haven't heard Lindsay Sterling?
which one?
You haven't heard Lindsay Sterling?
Not maybe like one or two songs, but her name doesn't like immediately ring a bell.
Well,
Ooh.
she's a violinist that dances. She dances and it's dubstep. She plays. Yeah, it's
this
that
episode
sounds pretty awesome.
This episode should have been a video recording. I mean, people who are listening out, missing out race monkey jumping, and you reenacting violin dancing. This is pure gold.
It's true.
Can I check, Will? You know, when you went to see Street That Manifesto, did you get into the mosh pit?
No, I did not.
Come on.
Yeah.
What?
I know.
Were you trying to be COVID safe? Were you?
It was pre-COVID, luckily. So, but yeah, I just my body doesn't. I mean, there wasn't like much of a mosh pit there, anyways. But
what is it?
I'll
be the guy, like the guy.
What
with
is
the
a mosh
clue.
pit? You mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like all the front of the front of the audience, which are going mental and sort of packing, and jumping, and dancing.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the scene.
Name. Okay.
Like, when I was a teenager, I went to a few like metal shows, and they get really into their sort of moshing and beating each other up and throwing each other around. And I did that like once, and I was like, okay, this hurts. Like, I don't know if I want to pay a bunch of money to go and get a black eye.
I like punk mosh pits because so I grew up. My stepdad is in a punk band, right. And so I grew up like punk, and so I would be this like 10, 11, 12-year-old little girl. My dad would take me to the shows, and they were chill enough that when I wasn't in there, they would go a little rougher. It was fun, but then they would let me in, and they would let like a 12-year-old girl dance and skunk around in these awesome mosh pits. So that was.
Is it the place where they throw the singers onto the crowd? Is it that one? No,
that's crowd waving, isn't it? Crowd surfing.
Okay.
All right.
But yeah, I remember when I was because I was a punk when punk was a thing. When your dad was a punk, I was a punk. And then the mosh pit was just basically just pushing everyone around, and it was quite extreme, really. But if I'm not wrong, Will, you do some martial arts, don't you? So you're kind of built for it, really.
Punch other people and then move to the front.
Well, the martial art that I chose is also specifically one that I do not get hit in the face a lot. So, okay. I've got to protect the brain, the moneymaker. But yeah, I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I got my black belt back in 2019. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. And I haven't I actually yesterday trained for the first time since like February of 2020, because it turns out that wrestling around with people, grappling with people is like not super COVID safe. I just wasn't super comfortable with it, but yeah, so I'm getting back into it.
So you're very sore today is what I'm hearing.
I went light. I'm easing my way into it. I've also got like a ton of injuries that I'm still coming back from. COVID has actually been great for like my overall injury recovery process. Terrible in other ways for my health. So I'm trying to see okay, instead of going deep into that trough again of having everything hurt and being like, okay, how much is that surgery going to cost? Trying to stay on that healthy track instead.
So what does Brazilian yeah, I've got a words thing. What is
the only thing that is fencing and lancing?
Yeah, what's the difference between like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and sort of standard jiu-jitsu from jiu-jitsu?
It's taught in Portuguese.
Yeah, sometimes I've been to a few classes in Portuguese, but I mean it's all sort of like, yeah, the branding and everything is like very nebulous. So if you go to a school that teaches jiu-jitsu, you can't always be sure exactly what you're getting, because like jiu-jitsu just means martial arts in Japanese, and so
That's very convenient naming. Like, what are you learning? Martial arts. No, what should we name this?
Yeah. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is sort of like a branding around this sort of style of martial art, and that started in it started in Japan as sort of it was like pre-judo. Like, if you know what judo is about, like, it's in the Olympics. People like throw each other and pin each other and stuff like that. And it's a very explosive, like, athletic martial art. It's really fun to watch. At least the highlight reels are really fun to watch. But sort of like pre-judo, there was kind of this, primordial form of that grappling art that got brought to Brazil, because there's a huge, a huge population of Japanese people that immigrated to Brazil during that time, and so then it grew there, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is also very much linked to the history of MMA and the UFC. So like the people that started the UFC are they're the Gracie family. There's a part of the Gracie family that started the UFC, and they're also the ones that really popularized and grew this martial art in Brazil and then in America, called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, it dominated UFC. Once people started doing BJJ, didn't they just, like, any martial artist that was doing BJJ would just destroy every other martial arts, from my understanding. And so that's part of what
BJJ already. Popular. I mean, this is pretty good. This is what we got to run for. So
I have a question for you, Will. So my understanding is that BJJ is very, I don't want to say movement driven, very combination driven, in that you see your opponent doing this. So it's almost like chess, where your opponent does this, you do this, and you build on that. And it's interesting here that you have a background in music and classical music, in a background, you also enjoy BJJ, which my understanding at the higher levels, which if you're a black belt, you're doing the higher levels. You're really kind of weirdly applying these, the same kind of thinking that I think we do in programming a lot, with, solving problems and thinking programmatically. Do you feel like you use the same part of your brain to those things, or are they totally, like, separate for you?
Yeah, is there Clojure script in Jiu-Jitsu or not? That's the biggest question.
I think that it's easy to sort of like pull generalizations out of, like, all these different, like, complex topics that that I participate in and that everyone else participates in. So definitely, like, knowing how I learn and how I sort of, like, think about problems helps me understand how I can apply myself to, like, I programmed for far longer than I've done jiu-jitsu, less time professionally, but I started programming when I was, like, in grade school, just, like, messing around on the family computer, going back to, like, me being the epitome of millennial. And
MySpace?
I wasn't, I wasn't on the social media train that early, but I guess unless you count Neopets, like, is Neopets social media? And if so, I was
RuneScape,
like really into
RuneScape, I feel like.
I didn't play a lot of RuneScape. No. But, it's to bring that back to jiu-jitsu, there's a lot of sort of, like, analysis that, I apply to, like, learn, like, okay, how should I solve these different problems? How are other people solving those problems? But unlike sort of, programming in Clojure script, there's a huge, like, performance part of martial arts. Like, when I go to a tournament, for instance, that is an area and a context that, like, I was super unfamiliar with. Like, I kept trying to apply, like, how do I analyze this and, like, be more, like, analytical in my approach to how I'm, like, combating my opponents in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, and it just didn't work. And I had to, like, learn how to, like, sort of quiet that analytical part of my brain, and, be more, like, in the moment and get into a flow and, just do what I had trained to do in the weeks and years prior.
I'm not sure if this is like a programming mindset or something, because every time you talk to a programmer, and then if they see like, oh, cooking, it's just like programming. Oh, martial art, it's just like programming. Like everything is just like programming for some reason for programmers.
Well, if you're a programmer, dude, I can tell that the way my brain has fundamentally worked, because I've only started programming recently, and I did MySpace, and then I just didn't own a computer for years and like lived on, and now I'm super heavy into it, and my brain has changed, and it's recent enough that I can remember and I can realize that the way that I think about problems, the way I solve problems, the way I am just more naturally inclined to solve engineering problems.
Yeah.
It's changed and it's evolved, and it's so cool.
But isn't it then, causing kind of a fucked up situation where you keep thinking everything is an engineering problem, even when you deal with people, even when you deal with, psychological things, even when you deal with everything looks like I can debug the shit out somehow. All I need is a REPL into my dog's brain, it's
but you're talking about, that's the exact problem with Facebook and Google, isn't it? Is that they actually think that.
Yeah. To make everything programmable. I mean, leave some shit alone, I guess. Then maybe that would be one thing.
That gets me on the social medias. I know how these algorithms work, so I know how to fool some of them, and I just willingly won't do it on some platforms.
I think there was somebody who posted a comment this morning. I read that they were on Facebook, and then they keep liking anti-conservative, anti-church, whatever something, for whatever the reason, for their personal reasons, and then they get recommended only the conservative stuff, like the ads. So someone was saying that the algorithm is not able to figure out whether pro and anti thing is actually a thing, So all it can pick up is the keyword that says conservative.
Right,
okay,
right.
it's just I recommend. It's like you keep liking, I don't know what kind of person you would be if you click I hate dogs sort of thing, and then you keep getting advertisement for dogs. Anyway,
I think even
if we go back to the jiu-jitsu thing, though, that seems to me it's a bit more like Twitch live streaming. It's like,
or
if I'm taking Jordan's stuff on board.
Yeah.
There's a definite like performance aspect of it. There's also a deep analytical aspect. Learning sort of the language of the how your body moves, and all the rules that again jiu-jitsu, we're mainly wrestling with each other, we're grappling, so I'm not getting punched in the face all the time, which is something that I enjoy not doing, and
nice.
and so and so there's rules, there's the way that your body moves, and so that as you get more experience, you start to be able to anticipate what other people are going to do, if they also understand how their body moves and how the rules kind of work. And then,
nice.
You start to build a game around that. And so that the analytical thinking of sort of programming is very useful in that aspect of it. But, like Vijay was saying, there's a whole realm of it that just, trying to stay in that analytical part of your brain just doesn't help you perform at all. And I think that's actually true of programming to some extent too, because it's easy for me to focus on okay, how do I optimize this algorithm, or how do I structure my application, but in a way that is sort of fits the mechanics of the problem that I'm thinking about. But there's also you're communicating intent and all this information through your code and through your documentation to other people, and we don't spend as much time. That's a much harder problem to sort of sit down and analyze. It requires more communication and empathy and social skills.
I think that's why we take the shortcut of just writing the code, and if it works, then I'm done. Instead of worrying about let's document this, let's try to explain this shit to someone else.
How do those people? I see all these Twitch streamer coders, and I'm like, how are you able to just sit down for hours at a time and not only write code, but also, I hope you're writing documentation, and then talk it out at the same time, because pairing is one thing. Pairing, you can just be like, oh shit, sorry, coworker, let me, my cat, you can pause, you can think, you can go,
You're allowed to do that on a Twitch stream.
On Twitch, yeah.
I think if someone tunes in for like 3 hours of 3 hours of Twitch stream, they're going to expect they expect fuck ups. I mean, I think Twitch stream is a bit like many things, like this show, or like many things. Everyone likes it when people fuck up, It's like when we do the apropos thing, this YouTube channel. People really like it when we make a mistake in the REPL, or they can send in better examples. They love that kind of shit, So, and I think actually, as long as you embrace that, there's someone out there on the internet's got a better idea. It's okay, it's all right.
That's true.
I was thinking of starting like a thing like every Saturday, because I usually pick up some random shit that I have no idea about and then try to punch my brain through it. So I was thinking, okay, this is going to be like Saturday night live software soliloquies or something, like it's going to be the brand. And then I just keep Googling shit and then sharing my screen, and nobody is going to enjoy that show. And that's gonna discourage a generation of programmers. Like, is this what programming is? No fucking way. I'm not going to get into this shit.
They're already ruined with Copilot. They're already ruined.
I did try it.
Did you?
Yeah.
So you got VS. Whoa! You got VS Code, VJ?
I have every possible editor on my thing, because I need to know. You need to know your enemy. That's the whole idea of martial arts, apparently.
I know.
I got invited. I don't know why. Ah, God. Okay. Well, that's a Gen Z thing.
No. I recommend VS Code for other people that are learning to code, because it's too much to learn Emacs and anything else at the same time. So if you're trying to fix stuff, use VS Code with pair edit, so you get some good habits.
Yeah, that's,
or if you're
that's
doing
a good
PyCharm, if you're doing Python, also PyCharm is pretty great. So okay, IDs. What ID do you use, Will?
Yeah, so on that bombshell, we need to know, Will, Emacs or some other shit.
Yeah.
This is going to conclude the podcast, so think carefully.
Yeah, you had to know this was coming. You knew what podcast you were on. You know VJ's question, his main question.
I did. I was going to be actually super sad if we got to the end of this and he hadn't asked me that, because I am an Emacs user. We just only got started.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. The one true editor.
I mean, I can
to the Emacs section.
Emacs podcast.
I tried to undo yesterday. I tried to undo yesterday, and it locked up my Emacs. And I was like, for a brief second, I was like, maybe I'll switch to
VS Code
or something to VS Code, because I think it's something messed up. It's definitely like a problem with my config, but
No, I have that same problem. I config that, like, I'm telling you, 1 out of like 1,000 times. It's only 1 out of 1,000 times. Undo just stops working. Just doesn't work anymore. And I have to like close down Emacs, start it back up, and then it'll work for another like 1,000 times.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that you're struggling with Emacs, but you need to understand that Emacs is more like a Buddhist way, like suffering is part of life. So sometimes shit hits the ceiling, and then you just accept it. That's taking you to nirvana, You need to accept the suffering.
Is telling you Emacs is telling you have to be intentional with your code. There is no try. There is no try. Only do.
Exactly.
There's definitely no undo. Or there is, but it might just lose all of your work that you just did. No, I mean, I'm super. The thing is that like I'm still really bought into like the idea of Emacs, of this like programmable interactive environment. Like it's one of the things that I love about the idea of Clojure and Clojure script, and this idea of having a programmable environment that I can like also have a decent enough text editor in is like really attractive, but it's just like in practice, sometimes it's a little painful.
Oh, I guess let's get into your before Clojure, and how did you find the light?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I mean, like I said, I started programming a long time ago, but I've sort of always like bounced around like different languages. And so, my pet, the project that I used to always do in like every language that I would try was this was way back in the day, but I would write an IRC bot in it. So I've probably written an IRC bot in like at least a dozen different languages just to try it out. But this was
IRC, not higher C.
no, yeah.
You need to.
Sorry,
that's premillennial IRC.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I know IRC, but the way you said it, higher C, I was like, oh, well, C sucks. Higher C must really suck. Okay, go on. Sorry.
That is a language of the priests. Next level.
I was like,
only available to the higher category of society.
The fuck is higher C? Oh man! Okay, so you wrote an IRC bot.
Yeah, and but this was, I didn't encounter Clojure until I was. I'd been working in the industry for a few years, and I was still, I was writing JavaScript web applications for a living back then. And this was back in like, there was lots of churn in the language at the time. Like ES6 was like this brand new thing that everyone was talking about. And like, I was getting excited about that, but I was like, at the time. Yeah.
It stopped, has it?
Well, now we're on to like ES 2030
I'm just checking,
or whatever it is, ES 2025. ES6 is like, if you're not supporting that, like, what are you even doing? Which there are plenty of browsers actually that still don't support that, depending on what kind of application you're working on. But I was experimenting with more functional languages, like the JavaScript features that were coming out were sort of like reported as being better because they were more functional. And I was like, oh, functional languages, that sounds interesting. And so I tried like Elixir and Erlang, and I was into that for a minute. And then I started getting into like OCaml, but I was bouncing around to all these different languages, and then I did some experiments with like Clojure and ClojureScript. And then I had this opportunity at that job we were starting a greenfield project. And I was like, okay, what, I'm going to make the business case here for like, something other than JavaScript and Java, which was kind of what our stack had been up until that point. And I was like, what if we could like unify, the two stacks with one language, and like, and sort of like, politically within that organization, there was this big, there was like a split between like you were a web front end developer or you were a back end developer. And I was like, I want to try and fix that as well. I wanted to try and, meet those minds together and, share resources in that way. And so I ended up deciding to pitch Clojure and ClojureScript as the solution to that. And that's where it went from like something that I kind of played with as a hobby to then, okay, now I'm working in Clojure and ClojureScript full time, and doing it as a hobby, and open source work and all that stuff. So that's kind of my journey.
They bought into it, I guess. But what was your pitch actually? Because that's often maybe it's like it's just awesome, works for the people you were talking to, and I'm Will, so trust me, I'm an Acton. I don't know, but maybe that's enough. But if you've got any more details, that would be also nice, just in case people still need the bullets.
Yeah, I think actually, so Derek, the CTO of the company that I work for right now, has a great talk called I think it's titled like "Why ClojureScript," or something to that effect.
I think it's ClojureScript for the skeptics.
Yeah, that's it. ClojureScript for the skeptics, and that talk actually helped me a ton. I think that there was I was very lucky in that like the boss that I had at the time was very willing to give me like autonomy and authority to like make some of these decisions and support me in that to like people outside of our team. So that was huge. And then, the developers on the team, I kind of laid it out like, listen, we've been building, applications using JavaScript and Java for a long time now. We see some of the warts there, and the things that we're starting to adopt, the best practices that we're adopting, are basically what's already in Clojure and Clojure script proper, right? Like they come out of the box with all of these tools to support like immutability and you know and we also get you know we aren't losing like the ecosystem of libraries that we pull in to like you know save labor and stuff like that. So you know it definitely wasn't like unanimous like yeah let's do it, but people were like yeah you know we trust Will and you know he's making some good arguments here, like let's give it a shot. And so I was very lucky in that regard.
Just on timing. On the timing, yeah, go on. I got enough. On the timing, was this pre or post Shadow?
This was post Shadow, so that also helped a lot as well, I think, because you know, so this was back in like 2017, I think. So it was you know we definitely adopted Shadow CLJS after you know I had sort of like tried all of the other things that were out there, because for us we already had a ton of JavaScript experience. We had libraries that we had built internally that we needed to be able to adopt, and Shadow CLJS just made the most sense back then to do that. And so I haven't really like I've kind of like found my like little home in using Shadow CLJS as my build tool. And so
isn't this going to be a big argument? It's not going to be a big argument in your company because you know they know you have black belt in jiu-jitsu. So you say Clojure script, they're like, okay, you know, moving on. You're gonna karate chop their head off like with higher C. So some shit is gonna happen. Who knows?
So I'm interested on did it work? Because we all know about this this front end, back end developer situation, I will say. So like did it work to unite people? Because even you know Clojure and Clojure script, even though they're the same language, and I'll seduce people into Clojure, I'll tell them it's the same language, same thing, and then like you know see the Clojure script code with like all the hard boys, which are to call I don't even know what what's the official name of, not the parenthesis, the brackets. Square brackets. Yeah. And it's the workflow is still very different, and thinking in a front end, because you kind of have to embrace mutability when you're doing front end to a certain extent. You know you can't get it in back end. You can really get away with being like, no, we're not changing things back here. So did it work? And follow up question: what do you consider yourself, like in your heart, a front end or a back end or a polyglot?
Okay. Yeah, I think that organizationally it did do what you know I said that one of the goals was, which was to allow us to you know unite the developers, you know, front end and back end. It wasn't just all the language, right? Like this was sort of like a push for us as a team, and like other teams were really pushing to like because before this project, we even had like separate teams for front end and back end, and that was like awful, you know. And so we were really pushing for like let's have like you know vertical integration in our teams. Like let's have you know the front end and back end guy actually talking to each other rather than like you know sort of like throwing tickets over the wall or whatever. And I think it worked out. I think that you know that organizational change worked out really well for us. You know, and Clojure script helped because it sort of helped pitch to the business that like, hey, you know, Amy over here can like, you know, she's a backend dev, but you know, she can like come in and like work on some of the front end stuff, and she's not going to be like, she already knows Clojure, so she can like, you know, mess with the syntax. She doesn't have to set up a whole like new like editor and tool chain and stuff like that, and vice versa, you know. But everyone still had their like specialties, and I would say that like at that company, I was very much growing into being like sort of full stack, I guess, is sort of like the term of art that we use these days. Working a lot on the back end and the front end. And when I joined Imparity, that was the reason that I joined them was because it was really a chance for me to sort of specialize. And so, I've been working. I still make changes all across the code base there, but for the most part, my sort of area of ownership and my specialty is on the front end there.
And in your heart?
In my heart, I mean, so
IRC bots.
No. I would say like going back even further, like, my first programming language ever was the game maker language. So it was it was a program for making games, and it had this drag and drop interface, but I was like, it has a language too. And I was like, 11 and had all the free time in the world. So I learned that. But the problem was, at the time I wasn't very skilled in like art, like making computer art or like writing stories and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, what other thing can I do? So I made, an app essentially with buttons to launch my favorite applications. And, it brought me a lot of joy in my heart to make a button that when I clicked it, it did something. And so still to this day, I feel like I have that, feeling of joy in my heart every time I make a button that does something. And so that's why I think in my heart of hearts, I'm a front-end developer.
Yes.
So I click the button and then console log hello world. I'm like, okay, my work here is done. Nice. But what other languages that you experimented with or played with? Because if it is mostly front end, is like CoffeeScript or TypeScript and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've done a lot of TypeScript as well. And the one that I was really, into before I got into Clojure script was a language called ReasonML. Which is like it's like a new syntax developed by Facebook for OCaml that looks more like JavaScript but still has all the same type system. And then I was at the time they were coming out with like, okay, you write your code, your statically typed code in using this ReasonML syntax, and then you compile it using this compiler called BuckleScript, and then it comes out as like relatively readable JavaScript. And I was really into that. I really enjoyed that for a little while. Now it's been like rebranded and sort of like changed. Now it's called Rescript, where it's kind of like, instead of being like sort of 2 to 4 separate projects all work together, now it's like one bundle, which is probably better for a developer experience. And I considered it at the time as well, like, back, when we were starting that new project, like, okay, what if we did like OCaml on the back end and, BuckleScript compiled, OCaml on the front end. But I just didn't see like I had experimented with writing like bindings for a few JavaScript libraries in ReasonML, and it was a very painful, arduous process. Like even creating like sound bindings to JavaScript promises, I was having to dive super deep into these like really complex, like type theoretical like constructs to like get there. And I was like, am I going to be able to explain phantom types to like some of my coworkers, like to like, to be able to use some of these libraries that I'm trying to bind to? Probably not. Like I didn't see like, it just wasn't, I didn't see it as very useful. It was very fun. I really enjoyed working within the OCaml type system. There are lots of fun puzzles to like pull apart and like try and piece together there. But ultimately I was like, I think it makes more sense for us as an organization to use like a dynamic language like Clojure and ClojureScript.
Yeah, just on that note, when I've worked with Clojure and ClojureScript, we've usually had some sort of data representation in the middle or some business logic in the middle written in like CLJC. Is that something which you went with as well, or is that something you adopted? Because this, I think it started off being pretty. I think it wasn't very well picked up at the beginning, CLJC, but now I feel like more and more libraries are starting to do that, and more people are starting to get into it, despite some of its warts. Are you a fan?
Yeah, I try and write, any library that isn't like targeted to a specific platform. So like Helix is still a bunch of it is CLJC, but that's mainly for like sort of organizationally, like I can have macros and functions in the same like file that might operate at different times in the compiler toolchain. But like other libraries that I've written, like that aren't targeting a specific platform, like JavaScript, I try and write them all in CLJC because I think that there's a lot of power in being able to use the same tools on the front end and the back end. Mm-hmm. And at that company, we had like sort of a shared data model that we were also building at the same time, and the way of talking front end to back end, the sort of the way that we were sharing that was through GraphQL. So we had a GraphQL service that was sort of like, here's everything that you would need to know about a user and their accounts and, all that stuff. And you could talk to that, via the front end or via some other service. And that worked okay. But again, kind of going back to like being constrained by the type system, I felt very constrained by the GraphQL type system. And so that made a lot of sense for us because like we had JavaScript clients that weren't built in Clojure scripts that were starting to adopt that as well. But I think that like if we were all Clojure and all Clojure script, something in CLJC or something that used Eden as the transport would like make a lot more sense to handle that sort of like shared business logic and shared like representation of again like who a user is, their account information and stuff like that.
Nice. I think before we switch to the next topic, I think we need to address the emergency kitten in the podcast now.
Well,
we have a special guest.
Yeah.
What's his name?
It's a her. She's a lady.
Yeah, come on. What's the cat's pronouns?
I think
Jesus.
I think first,
Yeah, you didn't even
first
ask
I should
my
ask
cat's pronouns.
Fair enough. Yes.
This is pretty girl, pretty lady.
What's her name?
Pretty girl, pretty lady.
Right. Okay. I thought you were just describing her.
I mean, it's a self-describing. It's a self-describing name. She's a pretty girl. She's a pretty lady. She had another name once, but I haven't used it in like since I got her. When I got her, I named her Luna because I really liked that. I've watched it since then. That anime Sailor Moon when I was younger. I was just obsessed with it, and Luna is the cat. And that.
Right.
Okay.
And I watched it as an adult. I'm like, oh, these are not great values for a child to pick up. Okay. Scratch that. Scratch. Meow. And so I got her and she's just the prettiest lady. So,
nice. I think we have one more. I was just expecting just one more guest, but then now we have even better guest.
Yeah, but you've got your dog in the fucking background as well.
Yeah,
come on.
Let's do a round of pets. Border Collie, right?
Yes, he's a Border Collie. His name is Baurik Wauberger.
Okay, what's his? That's his name, but what's his like real name? What do you call him?
It's a short. The short version is Bowie.
Bowie.
Like I've been told it's like David Bowie. Apparently, I didn't know who that guy is, but
you got to watch Labyrinth.
You thought the knife?
Okay,
you'll get it.
Okay, I have no clue. But every time I take him on a walk, or some old people, they ask, "What is the name?" And then David Bowie, and they're like, "Let's dance." I'm like, okay, I don't know what "Let's Dance" is. Cool, I guess. But actually, he's not named after the music guy. He's named after a character in Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy. So, which is a bit of everything.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Oh, that is
he's
the version of it.
He's the weird immortal guy who doesn't die. He gets bored. So he decides to insult every being in the universe individually, alphabetically. So that's his mission. So I think that's my dog.
I have a reject library. One day I'll turn it into something that does something, but I still have the GitHub repo just with the name Heart of Gold is a really good. That's going to be one of these days.
Something.
I don't know. It's going to be a ClojureScript library of some sort that doesn't do what
it's going to have
everybody else's ClojureScript libraries already do.
Yeah, because it's going to have the infinite improbability drive.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. See?
Okay, let's not make this Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy podcast. I think I know Ray has way more software-y dog.
Soft what?
Software related dog.
Oh, software related. Oh yeah, well, service related, please. Yeah. It's he's called EULA, which is like end user licensing agreement. You know, we argued a lot about the name, but in the end we just, and the dog, but in the end we just accepted it. So it's and it's complicated. We don't know what's going on there. There's a lot of small print. But,
you just scroll up and then say accept, move on, agree.
Yeah, exactly.
Should have named it Cookie.
Yeah, he keeps on getting updates, but
What about you, Will?
I personally do not own any pets. I managed to. I thought about it a lot. I thought I was going to get a dog at some point during the pandemic, but
good you didn't get a COVID puppy. Think about all the horrible COVID puppies that are.
Hey, my dog is COVID puppy.
We both got COVID puppies, me and Vijay.
Exactly, yeah.
Well,
other people in my life got COVID puppies, so I get to have the benefit of
experience them,
hanging out with them and playing with them, and then I get to eventually they go away.
It's different because we're never going to have to go back to the office though.
That's true.
Y'all remember before COVID, it was not hard. Remote work was. But now it's just nobody will ever make a programmer, never pay for office space.
Yeah. Because I already changed my job to fully remote. So after getting the dog. So my life is basically being his assistant and his chauffeur, driving him around.
Border Collies I used to have a Border Collie. Border Collies you got to entertain them.
Yeah. He's fun. But I was asking about pets. You're gonna say, "Oh, my Neopet is still alive." I was expecting.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Do Neopets die? That would be pretty dark for a children's game.
Well,
maybe they do.
Philosophical.
Well, let's look into it. Where's the server? Maybe.
This pet can be rescued.
Gotta get a hacker in to do it.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Mr. Roboto would do that to the animals in Sonic. No? Okay. That's cool.
Anywho, so I think we had music segment, we had martial arts segment, we had a little bit of Clojure about somewhere nearby, and then we have pet segment, and then I think we should sneak back in a little bit into Clojure thing, because you said you primarily front end, and you've been building front end stuff in ClojureScript. And so, what is your stack? So, is it Reframe, or is it something that you built yourself, or
You wouldn't do that. No, come on. No one's going to do that.
Y'all didn't even listen to the talk that he so kindly linked to us.
Yes, I watched it.
I was at the gym on the treadmill listening to your talk, just so you know. That's people were giving me looks wow, that's your usually must be a masochist.
Preparing for podcast
this talk wasn't that bad. Come on, Jordan.
No, VJ's just a master of transitions and leading questions. He's teeing me up.
No, I'm not leading weird questions. I have no fucking clue. I don't do any preparation, as you can see, for the podcast. Zero. So all the dumb fucking questions I'm asking.
Who I was at the beginning of the podcast, and who's this woman, and who's this bloke with the beard? That's what.
Well, I guess we cannot assume. We shouldn't assume our listeners have watched the talk. So I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will, take it away, Will.
Exactly. Listeners and me.
Yeah, I think I've spent the majority of my time building UIs in ClojureScript using Reagent and Reframe. In the last year, a little over a year, I've started to adopt this library that I created called Helix, which is a much thinner library around React. Because React came out around that time with this feature called React Hooks, which is like a very reagent like API for managing state. It's very similar to like the API that Reagent provides. And you can build your components as functions and all that, so you don't have to mess with like classes, and it's a little less object oriented. And I was like, oh well, I could use that and instead. And so thus Helix was born. TLDR there, but
how is it?
And we started to. How is Helix different from Reagent?
How is it different from Reagent or Reframe and other sorts of approaches? Because we had a wave of React based, or not React based. I mean, things that are built on top of React to make easier for ClojureScript. So starting from Om Next, Rum, I don't know, Quiescent or whatever. There's like many flavors came out, and then finally Reframe became the predominant thing that people are using these days. Reframe plus Reagent, and then now it's like sacrilegious to say no, we're not using Reframe anymore on the front end. So how is it?
Yeah,
how
sacrilegious.
Is it
wow. Okay.
I just wanted to use the word. I don't know what that means.
Will,
It's a really good question.
How dare you insult Tony?
I mean, yes, I've fallen a long ways from my high RC days, my high RC days to I'm now sacrilegious. But no, I think that when I was building UIs using Reagent and Reframe, there were some things that I found frustrating. There were some decisions that were sort of like made for me in there that I was like, what if I could try like other stuff? So, Helix is really like, let's take out some of those features. It has less features than Reagent and Reframe. I think that that's important to communicate, because Helix is really like, how can we provide the best interface to like stock React? Those other libraries that you mentioned, like Om and Om Next and Quiescent and Fulcro, they provide a bunch of stuff that, out of the box for you to like, and generally like opinions on like, here's how you should structure your application. Here's how you should, manage the concerns of like, routing and, other kinds of state. Helix doesn't have any of that. It's really just like, how can I bind to React in a way that feels like nice for ClojureScript developers? And then, the idea is that then that leaves more room for experimentation and things like libraries to manage like data fetching or navigation or other things like that.
So you actually did the proper thing and made a library, not a framework.
In a way, React itself is like its own like framework. Like React has a lot of stuff that it wants to manage for you. And if you want to manage it outside of React, there's like trade-offs to that. And so that was the reason that like, with Reagent, managing all of your state in like an atom that lives outside of the component tree was a decision that was made for me by Reagent. And I was like, well, what if I want to use like local component state, truly like, the React feature of that? It was really difficult in Reagent. And so, I think that I was trying to like, React already has a lot of ideas that are in its core that are core to Clojure. And so I was like, well, what if I just ran with that rather than, trying to build something on top of it?
So is there a way to mix Helix and Reagent? Like if you let's just say you happen to have a couple of big old production apps that are Reagent and Reframe, and you wanted to just dip your toe in, like, what's up with this Helix stuff? Because it's as someone who's kind of made a career out of Reagent and Reframe now, I'm now it's
expanding the portfolio.
I do you start to see the cracks, I guess,
but also regret.
yeah. and then it's like
Reagent, Reframe, regret.
First you see through the Reframe thing, you're like, wait, Reframe is just Reagent with state. manage. It's just like predefined state management for reagent. Why am I not just using reagent? And then use reagent. You're like, why am I not just using React? Oh, wait, that's why. So is that, I guess, like back to the question. It's like, is there a way to like dip your toe in and see what's up with Helix, but not just like, make the decision, just like flip your application upside down.
Just create a new branch, remove reframe and reagent, and then add Helix as the dependency, and then get started.
There's definitely a way that. So that's the reality that we are in at Imperity right now. Is that we have this very large, it's like tens of thousands of lines of code. One of the largest reframe applications that I've worked on.
How long is the events namespace?
Luckily we split those out long ago, but there's a lot of events, a lot of subscriptions, a lot of, code that we've written, using those tools. And so, when we started to adopt Helix, we didn't want to have to go like rewrite everything from scratch. So, reagent actually is like you can kind of separate reagent into like, it's almost two different libraries. One is the binding to React. And so it's like, taking like the hiccup data structures that you write, the vectors and maps and keywords and stuff, and converting those into React components, or React elements, and then rendering them. And then there's this other part of the application that's like all of the like reactive atom stuff. And so the way that we
management.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, nobody can see my air quotes. I air quoted the state management because just in relation to your talk, what about state management? You're like, I'm tired of what even is state management?
What is that? I would ask.
I think what the fuck is state management, to be just to quote you properly, I think you cleaned it up, but I'll let it get down and dirty again.
We'll translate the statements more palatable to deaf an audience, because they don't understand the normal dialect.
You're right. I gotta shake loose a little bit. I gotta, this is a safe space. I can say what I feel.
Nobody listens to this crap, man. So don't worry.
So like, what the fuck is state management?
Exactly.
And we can get into that, but I want to answer your question first about
Please.
Can you use reagent and Helix? And the answer is yes, absolutely yes. You can. Reagent is actually like very permissible in that, like, if you just sort of plop a React element inside of your hiccup, it just works. So like if you render a reframe or a Helix component in the middle of your hiccup, then it'll just work. And then likewise, I haven't gotten around to like open sourcing this yet, but you can write a pretty small sort of like translation layer between the reactive atoms that reagent has and to React hooks. So like, at work we have a use reaction hook that you can just pass it like any Ratum or reframe subscription or anything, and it'll just re-render your Helix component based on like any state changes there.
Oh, so that's the answer, because I've been trying to figure out how to get in. I've been procrastinating getting in on that like React hooks. I've been procrastinating. I'm like, I guess this is really a thing I gotta learn now. Okay, so Helix is the can be a key to that, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that was kind of the original goal with Helix was, I wanted to experiment with React hooks and see what it was like to create a binding to React that allowed me to just use React hooks for state management. And so Helix was sort of that. I will say that, we did, to talk a little bit more about the experience of, mixing reframe, reagent, and Helix. We did at first try and be like, okay, we're only going to use hooks for state management. We're going to totally disregard reframe and reagent totally. And we found that was actually like not the best way to go about it. It became like, the stock, there's a reason that reframe and other solutions similar to it exist, which is that managing things like data fetching and stuff that with data that sort of exists outside of the life cycle of a component, it becomes really difficult to manage that just in local component state. And so having a way of managing those outside of the component tree is important. And so we still use reframe for things like data fetching and navigation and other stuff like that in our application today. But we find that a lot of sort of like the core work of like building, user interfaces that like when you click the button, something happens, that can be done mostly with Helix and local component state.
So for people like me, explain like I'm the dumb fucking idiot sort of thing. Like, what is this React hook that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think if people are familiar with Reagent, then Reagent allows you to create like atoms at sort of like construction. So there's like the form 2 components is kind of the term that they use, and so you can create like local atoms that then will re-render your component every time they change within the body of your component, wherever they're dereferenced. And React hooks is like a very mechanically similar API for doing that. So instead of like before the React hooks feature came out, if you wanted to manage some state inside of your components, you had to use a class. So you had to construct a class that extended the React.component class, and then you would call like this.setState and a method inside of your event handlers and all that. And it was very clunky. It was hard to like compose behaviors. So if you had components that all like had some like I don't know, some behavior that that had like both state and side effects and everything, it was like hard to like pull that out of the component and share that across components code wise. And so React hooks is something that like you can just write your component as a function that returns React elements. And then inside of the body of the component, you can call another function called like use state, which will then return you a tuple of like the current state and a function to change that state. And it's stable over re-renders. So you don't have to like, set stuff up in like the constructor of a class. You just call this function inside of the body of your component and then use the values that it returns to read the state and set the state.
Okay. So how did the name Helix come from? What's up with the name? Is it something like a what is it again? The manifesto level stuff or some punk rock thing? Because the only Helix thing that I know is that the some of the people who wanted to understand DNA thing, they were sleeping and then they dreamt about this structure, the scientists. So did you dream about this helical structure in the code somewhere?
No, it actually, so Helix actually started like the sort of the fundamental parts, like the bits and pieces that are there today, grew out of another library that I had written called HX. And HX was a library for parsing Hiccup into React elements. And so like that name was sort of like, I don't know, like Hiccup transformation. I was going for something there, like HX, just, I don't know. The letter X is cool, I guess.
Okay, nice. Follow-up question. Tell me about the name Lilac Town.
Lilac Town? It is an anagram of my name. So Will Acton is if you shuffle the letters around.
Okay, you shut the fuck up.
Lilac Town.
You clever cat, you.
Well, there's no W in it.
There is town.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, damn.
What? There is town.
How do you spell town?
Yeah.
God. And he's the English guy in this podcast.
If you're listening, cut this out. Okay.
No, keep that in. People need to know that Ray's English is before W was introduced into English language. I don't know. His English is from, Germanic nomadic sort of days.
I'm pre-WWW, you know, I didn't know.
Not everyone is good at like visualizing, you know, the way that words are spelled and stuff like that. So,
thank you, Will.
You know, yeah.
I love it. He's just ensuring there's no way to cut this out. Like the logic, there'd be no way to like have this make sense.
We don't cut anything out.
Okay.
So wait, what about the octopus though?
The octopus? I don't know. I just
You
like
have like a little like mirror guy like next to you. I thought it was related. I'm not like, what is this cult? Can I join? I really like purple. Is lavender? Can I do like Lavender City? Like like Lavender Road or something? Lavender Lane.
Yeah. Lilac Town, Lavender Lane. Nice. So, so you said there are obviously Helix is open source thing, right? People can use it, and then they need to just remove, reframe, and reagent, and then replace everything with Helix. That's what you said.
Exactly. That's exactly what I said.
Yes.
Verbatim.
Yeah. I don't paraphrase anything, man. You know, I'm here to just deliver the guests. But yeah, so there is a certain sense of pluggability, so you can easily introduce Helix. So this part is completely open source, and you said there are a couple of things that you're still working on. And what is the plan? Like, do you want to? Is it like some of those Clojure libraries where they're finished? You know, well, they're complete, not finished. You know, they're complete. Is Helix a complete library that you can use to build things, or there are more things that are coming from Lilac Town?
And HX is complete. Same question. HX, I know the answer, but I read your blog. Go on.
Yeah. I think, I'm kind of done working on HX. I just don't have a lot of interest in it. There's still some people that use it. And I've been, someone a while ago talked to me about like taking it over. And I didn't respond. And I feel bad about that still, because I don't know. I'm like in and out of like, sometimes I'm just like, I can't even look at a computer after I'm done with work. So
yes.
I just, so I apologize for people that reach out to me on like Clojure and Slack. I do appreciate the messages. And I do think that the people that are still using that library, they should be able to like fix some of the bugs that are in there and stuff like that. But it's not something that I use every day. So it's a little bit harder for me to like find all of those rough edges and spend the time fixing them. But with Helix, there's definitely still some things that I want to do before I call it done. There's just there's some decisions that I made early on about like little decisions, little details of the library that I'm like, I wish I could fix that. Like the way that it converts like the props that you write, that you're passing into your component, the way that it rewrites those from like, it tries to be smart, which is always like a dumb thing to do, right? Like it tries to detect like when should it like, convert your props from kebab case to camel case and like, some other stuff like that it just turns out like isn't true in all scenarios and is like frustrating to try and like work around when it's trying to be smart for you and it's actually being really dumb. And so I'd like to kind of like rip that part out and provide it as like its own macro or function that you can adopt when you need it. And then some other like kind of rearranging. The big thing that I think that Helix provides, other than just an API for React, is also the sort of more experimental features that I've been working on are like doing static analysis for your components. So detecting like, we've been talking about React hooks. There are all these like rules about how you can use hooks. Like you can't use them inside of conditionals or loops. And that's like something that React, has like extensive documentation for. And in the JavaScript community, there are like linters and things that will check that for you. And so recently I shipped a version of Helix that will check that at compile time to ensure that you're not calling a hook inside of a loop or conditional or other things that would break those rules and cause like bugs or things to fail in production. And I think that I kind of want to keep like leaning into that where, less runtime stuff, less like trying to build like, state management features or other things inside of Helix, but rather like, how can we make the developer experience for someone who's building user interfaces like really, really good and provide a base for those other solutions to be pulled in as libraries.
Nice. So is there a way for people to contribute to this vision that you have right now? Is it something that people can go to GitHub and then poke you when you're off the computer, call you and send you snail mail and,
Oh, feature toggle. Looking forward to that feature toggle. Is that in there and yet?
Well, it was actually, that feature of like, analyzing your component and telling you when you're breaking the rules. That was behind a feature flag for like, I don't know, 8 months or something like that. And I recently, the most recent version has it turned on by default. So, if people are using it and they're getting errors when they think they shouldn't, please open a bug report. But I've been using it for a while. Or a PR. Nothing worse than getting a bug report without a PR.
Stop complaining.
That means I have to do the work. No, it's actually really funny. So Dominic was on the podcast, like I don't know, maybe last episode or like a few episodes ago. And he was talking about how he tries to get other people to do like the work of like fixing bugs and stuff like that. I was like, that's what he's trying to do. That's why he keeps reporting these bugs. And then I'm like, great. I see that you already know what's wrong and how to fix it. Open a PR for me, please. And he's like, oh yeah, maybe I will. Like maybe.
Sussed.
No. He's been. He actually found a bug in the like hooks rule detection recently when you're trying to use hooks inside of JavaScript values, and he did open a pull request. So thank you, Dominic, if you're listening. But still, I feel like we're in like a stalemate because I'm like, I really like. I want to get as much work out of people who are using my library as possible, and he's like, I want to get as much work out of
to fix everything.
Will at least here as possible, and we're
Wait, you work with
battling.
Dominic?
No. He just has contributed a few times to Helix.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you worked with him, and I was.
I'm pretty sure I'll remind him to listen to the episode so he knows.
Great.
we know his tricks now, so I think people need to subscribe to your GitHub issues to see the back and forth between you and him. Like, no, you fix it. No, you fix it. Yeah, it's your library. You fix it.
A lot of it happens in the Helix Clojure channel.
Oh,
so it's disappeared.
Yeah, he'll come in and he'll write this super detailed analysis of like, here's like what's not working, and then he like dives into the Helix source code and he's like, I think this is the part that's like not working correctly, and here's I think how we could fix it. And I'm like, Dominic, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for all that. Like, will you open a PR for me? And he's like, no.
He's like giving you the line numbers and column numbers and what needs to be replaced. And I'm gonna type all the things that you're supposed to do.
I can't even hate because I've totally done that before. Where
I'm just throwing shade at him. I mean, there is like work that it's involved in, like creating like actual like production ready pull request and ensuring that it passes all of my stylistic things. So just his diagnosis alone is worth a lot to me. So I appreciate it.
You can enforce rules. You can be very what's that CLJS style? What are the ones? Okay, there's CLJ Condo, which is so polite and so nice. It's like, hey, by the way, this isn't great style, but no big deal. It's all right. And then some people are like, well, why doesn't CLJ go fix it? I don't want it fixing it. Maybe I want it to be bad code. What do you know about me? Like, I know the do is needless. Say less. Like, I get it. But
we like scumbag coding, shut up.
Yeah. But that's an open source project I was involved in for just a glimmer in time was the Athens
the project. Rome research thing, right?
Yes.
But open source Rome research thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the note taking toolkit
community.
And Jeff Tang had all sorts. Like, I will say, if anybody needs just a CLJS repo with just like the kitchen sink, I mean, we got everything set up. Like he got everything. He uses like DataScript, dev card, CLJS style, like did like all the bells and whistles to like try and, I don't want to say control, but like all the bells and whistles of a CLJS app. They got it.
Okay.
I kind of did something go on.
I think that can serve as an example, like, like the how to use some library. You just go to Athens Research and then just see the code there.
It's
like it will serve as a nice documentation for everything. I don't know if you know, there is a programming system called OZ. It's probably some sort of like a research thingy. They have every possible paradigm built into the language, like everything. If from structure, the imperative shit to structural things to object-orientedness to functional thing, and then message passing, like every fucking thing into one language. I'm like, okay, this is the only language that I need to learn.
Well, isn't that the mission of Scala as well?
No, Scala is halfway there.
I should know some more about Scala because people tell me like, oh, functional like other. It's so weird talking to other devs that aren't like so deep in this area because they're like, people are like, oh, like functional programming, like, oh yeah, I've done Scala. I'm like.
You're like, no way, that's not functional programming.
I just kind of nod and swallow because I don't know enough about it to like fight about it. Like that's a lot of things. I talk way too much for someone who does not know enough.
Anyway, let's get back to Will. Come on.
Yeah. So
he's still here.
I'm thinking, if you zoom out a little bit now, because if you spent enough time in Clojure script, building library, interacting with the community. Apparently you spoke on YouTube thingy that I don't know about, but I'm sure it's also. But I'm curious about your view on Clojure in general, Clojure and Clojure script, because you also work with OCaml a little bit, ReasonML. So there are like typing things there, and then you come to Clojure. JavaScript is like Wild West sort of shit for typing. How do you see the Clojure ecosystem and Clojure community? What do you like and what you kind of put up with?
Well, reagent is what you used to put up with.
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do. I still write reagent code, every day, and probably will for the foreseeable future. And I think that Clojure and Clojure script, it's been very interesting because I think that talking less about like sort of the programming paradigm and more about like, what do I see other people using it for? What do I see like out in the, rest of the industry? I mean, there's lots of companies that are being built in Clojure and Clojure script right now that, have been building in Clojure and Clojure script kind of like almost stealthed, for years now. And so I think that, from a professional standpoint, like it seems like there's a big market for people who are experienced in Clojure and Clojure script and, can kind of carve out a niche there. I think that, when it comes to building products in Clojure and Clojure script, there's, I think that the things that are really, I miss every time I go and try out another language are things like Eden, like having a like transport, like, because like Eden is like what we write code in Clojure, but it's also like a wire transport, like a wire, a way of communicating about data between like different services or between the front end and back end. And that's like super powerful that like the only other really mainstream language that we have that going on in is JavaScript. And, JSON is not a very rich language for doing that kind of stuff. Eden has like a ton of benefits over JSON. And so, that's the thing that I think that's one thing that I really miss, trying to use other languages to build products. And then, but there's still like one of the things that I think is tricky in Clojure is there's all these best practices that have been developed in other languages that we often bring into Clojure. That, those best practices were developed within the context of like C++ or Java or or TypeScript or whatever. So like they have like mechanical sympathies with like a type system or like other ways of like structuring code that are specific to that language. And when you bring them into a dynamic language like Clojure, they tend to fall apart at scale in my experience. Like honestly, I don't know if React wasn't such a behemoth of like just like mind share and like the millions of dollars of like R&D and development that has gone into making it as hardened as it is for like it basically serves as a universal runtime for user interfaces. But React also like grew up in this context of Facebook building user interfaces that they use a type system, they use Flow, or a lot of people in the industry are adopting TypeScript now because like the way that you write components and construct elements out of them, there's a lot of mechanical sympathy between the way that you write the code and having a type system to check that you're passing in all of these props and stuff to them correctly. And so there's what am I rambling about? What I'm saying is that like I think that there's a lot of room for experimentation in Clojure and Clojure scripts there, and I think that the more companies that are actually like investing dollars into the development of Clojure and Clojure script there are, the more that we're going to see that kind of innovation come out of like what's a solution that really works well in a dynamic language like Clojure is something that I'm interested to see.
Let me ask you, as far as what are your views on like spec, Molly, all of the spec? I'll just say spec-like things that are kind of, there's this argument of it can be better than a type system if you just use it the right way. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have a one of those that you subscribe to? Having worked with typed systems as much as
I think that we use spec a lot. I've used spec a lot more for like defining like it more for defining like the domain that we're working in. So like when we have a new like domain entity, the first thing that we do is we write specs for like the attributes that they have and like the shape that it has. And I find that very useful mainly from a documentation standpoint of being able to go and look at like, entity.core and see like, okay, here's all the attributes that may or may not show up inside of this entity. But when it comes to sort of like, validation of more stuff that like I kind of think about it as like, there's sort of two hats that you might be wearing when you're working within a product. One is the the sort of product engineer, which is like I'm going in and I'm trying to build a part of the system that does something. So I'm trying to make a button that when you click it, it like adds a thing to your cart or kicks off some backend process or whatever. And it's using these domain entities to like do all of that, but you're not really in the business of defining those. And so I find that spec is not super useful in that when I'm wearing that hat, because like if my user interface is in charge of running those specs and using it to validate these entities that I'm either constructing or consuming, a lot of times when I'm doing UI development, those are hot paths that like, if a spec validation takes like 20 milliseconds to, validate this like deep data structure that I'm generating or consuming, then I just blew my like frame allotment, right? It's a very tight, like you essentially have like about 16 milliseconds before you start to see the user interface degrade in performance. And so I really want to be intentional about like how I use that. And so doing a bunch of spec validation inside of the user interface, like, you know, when things are being passed into components or whatnot, is not, in my experience, something that is like good for the user's experience.
Well, you can do what I call the poor man spec, and I just write the fuck out of doc strings. I know it doesn't count as any sort of real catching, but I mean, hey, all it takes is this thing takes this and outputs this, and I hope you're using your REPL.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that specs can, well, if you do it right, you can have instrumentation for your specs that is turned on when you want it turned on and turned off when you don't want it turned on. You know, you can have instrument and unstrument. The new word, unstrument. You know, musical like, instrument.
So keep your spec on when you're in development, but then not on production. Is that what?
That's what it's meant for. I mean, you know, I mean, to be honest, I think it's. I mean, well, maybe Will has to have last word on this, but you know, it's a lot of work for you know, for relatively small gains, I think. And you have. I like these libraries where the specs are inside of the defins, rather than sort of, you know, like if fdefs and they're all. It's sort of like that becomes tedious and annoying to write all these externalized things. So I like Orchestra, for example. That's a good library where you get these things inside of your defins, and then you can turn instrumentation on and off as you wish per namespace or whatever. So that's pretty good. Sorry, Will. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, at the times that I've you know, played with stuff like that, you know, I've still ran into like, you know, oh man, I just passed in this like really deep data structure that like has all of these specs in it. Like, you know, it's not impacting the user experience, but now it's impacting the developer experience, and that like, you know, it has to, it's still impacting the developer experience, where now I'm having to like sit there and wait for like a second or two while it checks my spec to make sure that, you know, the data is valid. And so I think that, you know, using spec at like the edges of your system, you know, like when you're sending data or when you receive it on the back end, for instance, and then before you send it to the front end, those work really well. And I haven't used Mali, but I imagine that, you know, same thing there. But like specking components is something that I've played with a bit. I've experimented with it, and it's been really difficult. So that's kind of where I was talking about, like with the two hats. Like one is sort of like the product engineer, where like I'm building, you know, user interface or parts of the system that's like going to do work. And I find spec less useful for that. But then there's like the more, I guess, architect hat that I might put on, where I'm like, okay, what's my domain entities? How do I provide documentation and validation and parsing for these that people can use like sort of at the edges of their programs? And that's where I think that like spec and Mali and other libraries like that really shine.
So I think I got to ask you about your Clojure script and a lot of all these things. Now, are you keeping an eye on Dart, Flutter way of building front end? And what do you think about it? Because I know Christoph Grahn and then, but I think Baptiste, somebody, they're building like a Dart integration with Clojure script, something like that. It's only a couple of tweets. I vaguely remember what they were doing. I didn't dig deeper into that one. So what's your view on like Flutter and then Dart as a language, and how that is going to change the way that you're building the UI? Because the declarative UI seems to be a big deal. If you see Swift UI, you know, all these things are picking up that direction.
Yeah, I haven't experimented with Dart yet or Flutter. I think that they're really interesting. A lot of it is just like, you know, I think that the Clojure Dart project is exciting to me because it means that I'll be able to like probably have it. It'll be an easier jumping off point into like experimenting with that than like, okay, I gotta install like all these IDEs and like understand like Dart, the syntax, and like my brain is too full of other things right now to like think about that stuff. So, but I think that it's really, there's still a part of me that is suspicious of whether Google will continue to fund Dart and Flutter, right? Like there's a whole like, killed by Google. Like I think that that's really what it's about.
Symmetry.
Is that
that's their thing.
I like targeting like native, like truly like the native APIs of iOS and Android. It's a moving target. And that can be really frustrating, but that like, unless people stop using iPhones, this is still going to be like, a reasonable way of writing my application. Same thing with the web, right? Like web browsers are not going away. There's so much like value captured in them. Yeah, exactly. But like, there's always going to be like for the foreseeable future, building user interfaces for web browsers is going to be a great way of like providing, an experience for people that they can use. With Flutter, I'm still just a little nervous that, maybe it's not this year, maybe it's not next year, but like 3 years, 5 years down the road, there might be like a reorg in Google, and then suddenly like it's without funding, and then and the way that they're doing it is, for listeners that aren't familiar with it, like Flutter is like a complete re-implementation of the platform's like UI constructs. So instead of like binding to like
the native
Cocoa or Swift UI or something like that, they're drawing all of the stuff on a canvas, and they're trying to do their best to get like the same UI and behavior.
It's like the AWT in Java again, like back to that level.
Yeah, and so that's like just incredibly labor intensive, and it's based on like, is there going to continue to be funding for that to ensure that they, keep parity with, the way that the platforms behave and look.
Yeah. That's
So that's my like sort of, pointing a critical eye at Dart and Flutter, but I also think that, targeting it is with a Clojure, dialect is also like a really great plan, because it very well could be that, this provides like a way of getting native performance on like devices other than like servers and desktops. So that sounds really cool.
So what camp do you land in? SPA? I know you like SKA.
No. Get it up there, VJ. Come on, VJ. Okay.
But okay. I know you like so single page attribution.
There is a bit of a sorry.
No, okay. Refocus. Single page application or native app? If your perfect word. What do you pros, cons, likes, thoughts?
Yeah, this is why I'm like a terrible thought leader, is because like I'm always going to come in with and it depends, and I'm going to add more ambiguity to the situation rather than be like, this is the way. Because
I don't know
I
the
do
way.
think I do think that it's going to depend on like what you're trying to do, what your funding is, all that stuff. I do really like native applications. I like the way that they behave, like especially if I'm interacting with it on a smartphone, and also there's just like offline support and other things that even if you're using it on a desktop, like those are things that are really hard to build into a web application. There are people that do that, and but it's a ton of labor, and it's easier to do that with a desktop application in my experience. But the reach of web applications is just like hard to beat, and so when you're looking at it, it really is more tied to like, how are people paying for this, right? If you're paying for a service that you pay monthly to like access some service, then like a web application is probably going to make more sense for me, the user, and for the business to use, right? But if it's something that I buy as like a one-time like transaction, and then I have this application for like, until my computer dies or whatever, then I think that, a native application, it like makes more sense from a funding perspective. So that's my very medium take.
Diplomatic.
That makes sense. So I think we are almost reaching 90 minutes. Before we continue to punk rock again, or punk reggae rock thing.
You got it. See, Scott, you got it.
See, yeah, exactly. I just need to know the terms, and then So now I can say, oh, I know punk rock thing. I think it's one of those what is it again? Manifesto stuff, and then everybody thinks I'm hip now.
No, you could fall into some weird corners of punk though if you start talking about manifestos.
I have no clue. But any I know things that we missed, Will, from your experience, or did we touch up all the topics, or we have to do episode 2 with you again? Obviously, we have.
I mean, I'd always be happy to come on and talk about. I'll definitely pick a different shirt next time, preferably one.
No,
without,
you can't anymore because
Okay, don't be greedy, VJ. You can't have episode 2. Give some to Lost and Lambdas. Okay, I got a baby podcast. Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't like to cross promote. Come on.
Let me get Lilac Town. Jeez, selfish.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, we're like
we are cross-posting this. Come on.
Exactly. We're like Disney plus Empire now, in the Clojure podcast world. Like, Defen is like Disney plus level. So we acquired every possible, guest possible, every possible media thing. Anyway.
It's so hard. Oh, it's so hard getting guests trying to not overlap y'all.
Yeah, because it's a smaller group, but I think it's good that they talk to different people, right? Because if they're coming on Defen, it's mostly me and Ray bullshitting. So obviously if they go to the other podcast,
that's what I bullshit. I'm a bullshitter. No, we can't have the same.
No. You can't steal our thunder.
I'll just add some pink and purple and it's called rebranding. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Okay, questions for Will, though.
Varieties of bullshit can, be coexist. It's okay.
I stole your question, Will. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. I think I think we basically covered it.
Nice. But you should, obviously you need to go and then get into the podcast on what's the new name again? Instead of Lilac Town, it was Purple Lane something. You're gonna come up with a new name now.
Your Lilac Town will be Lavender Lane.
Yeah, Lavender Lane. Sorry.
Sounds like a name that.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't go with Lavender Lane.
maybe not a good idea. It sounds like a dodgy street in Amsterdam, but yeah. Anyway, so obviously, people need to listen to Jordan as well, and it was super, super fun to have you on the show, Will. Lovely to talk to you, and finally, I know about punk and rock and reggae and everything now.
And Clojure script.
And React hooks.
A little bit, I guess.
React hooks. The new hotness. React hooks.
I'm hooked. Yeah. So,
oh Jesus,
we're gonna
edit that out. I can't.
If there is one thing that the listeners should take away from this is that Will is brand ambassador for this street light manifesto. So that's one thing that you guys need to remember.
No. And
also,
BJJ. Black belt BJJ. I think that's another very relevant detail.
Exactly. Yeah. And also check Helix. Out this small thing in Clojure script that he's doing called Helix, and try to send him PRs so he'll be happy.
But only PRs on HX.
Yes.
Actually, this is a small thing, though. Actually, Will, is it? Do you do the GitHub sponsors thing? Is that something that you're looking for?
GitHub sponsors or?
I've thought about it, and I've thought about like looking for funding for some of my open source projects before, and I just wasn't. I haven't been in a spot where I felt good about like taking people's money, not that anyone would necessarily increase their expectations of me, but I would feel obligated to like do maybe more than I have.
It's very stressful. It's very stressful.
Yeah, I just haven't wanted that stress yet, but I am still thinking about that. I probably will at some point. If I don't, if I don't get fired for doing this podcast, then
well, you can blame Lost in Lambdas for that one. We've never had anyone fired before, so.
No,
but if you decide to go pull a trigger on that, yeah, you should talk to Jordan.
Hey, we could hire you at my company. Actually, we'll just steal. It was all a ploy. It was all a ploy to steal you.
I think that is the reason the question, like, can I introduce Helix teeny tiny bit, and then we get Will to the
Actually,
company.
that low key. That was a question from my CTO, as a matter of fact, because I go to my coworkers before I talk to somebody like, hey, any burning questions? Anybody want to know anything? And that, as a matter of fact, that was his question.
Nice. Yeah.
Hey, Rob.
All right.
Yeah, I've gotten that question enough times at this point that at some point I will like sit down and put pen to paper and actually write like a blog post or something about like, this is kind of like mechanically how to do it, and also like this has been our experience. I think that would be really valuable for me to do to sort of collect my thoughts on it, and also for the rest of the community, because like people are starting at different places. Some people are doing greenfield stuff and they look around and they're like, oh, we'll take Helix. Other people have long standing. I think that's the other thing that is interesting to me, like looking at the Clojure and ClojureScript community, is that a lot of the applications that are being built are applications that have been around for a number of years and are expected to exist for many, many years to come. And I think that like drives us towards like different solutions than like Ruby on Rails, and like in Elixir there's like the Phoenix framework, and like those are very useful for like consultants that are like spinning up a new application. Or I think like was it Dominic that was talking about Just Edge and stuff? Yeah, so that's like those are solutions to problems that like I just don't have right now, because I work on an application that has existed for 4 years already and is going to exist for hopefully a lot longer than that. And so having resources for okay, I need to spin up a project from scratch. How do I do that? Is very useful. Having like documentation and blog posts and guides and stuff like that for like, how do I migrate an application that I maybe started like 5 years ago to like the latest stuff, is also something that I think would be great to see in the Clojure community. I'd like to pitch in when I can.
I think the thing for me though about what you've done, I think what you've done is pretty special. In fact, Will, is this like being brave enough to kind of like take on existing thoughts and existing sort of thought leadership, if you like, in the ClojureScript space, and say, you know what, actually, these React people, they haven't done a bad job. They've built things up over the past couple of years. They've put a lot of money into it, like you say. Let's see if we can just make more use of the raw materials. And I think that's, I think people have been wanting to pull the trigger on that for a while, I think. And I think this hooks thing is definitely been a reason to do it. So, I think it's really great what you've done. And I imagine that a lot of people are quite excited about Helix. And it's always great to talk to people who've kind of like, I think Clojure to some extent is a little bit of a kind of like that. It's a bit countercultural. It's a bit like, respects and accommodates new bits of thinking. It's rad. It's horny. So yeah, I think it's really good. And congratulations on getting it, beyond kind of like a thought into the real world. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So a big thank you to you, Will, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on Helix and everything. I'm pretty sure people are going to check out your blog, and then if there is an opportunity to contribute in whatever the way, I think we encourage the people to do that. And speaking of money, so go ahead and check out our Patreon and then give us money.
Hey.
Man, there are really nice people who have been. There are a few new Patreon people who are supporting the podcast. That's a big thank you to everyone. And we are thinking of doing something like a Twitter Spaces or something, depending on schedule. So we'll do something exclusively for patrons. And having said that, I think Jordan, if you can wrap up, please tell us what next plans that you have on your podcast, so people will stop listening to our bullshit and then
come on, pitch Lost in Lambdas a little bit. Come on, we haven't given you much of a chance, actually.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, what had happened was I was getting my tweets on, and Bork Dude was the one that, I mean, it's not really much of a story. I just like to talk so much. And I just I like to talk to people, and I really like to I think it's important to humanize these developers. And I think that these experiences, talking and having real conversations with these, these screen names at Lilac Town, at work, and we forget that they're people, and they have, hobbies like BJJ and hiking and reading and just all these things. And I think it's really important to humanize, as somebody who weirdly learns best when I have an I guess an emotional interest tie into something. I will learn, like I learn best in school if I like the teacher. And I think a lot of people are like that. Yeah. And if you humanize and you look at the developers, you can be involved with the projects more. You can, just appreciate things more, and really just having fun. So yeah, Lost in Lambdas. I will keep like I said, I'm trying to find people that y'all haven't already talked to, or that will respond to my Slack messages, because I'll hit up somebody, crickets, nothing. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm not cool. That's fine. You'll regret it. Whatever.
No, I think trust
we
us.
We have to help you to get these people onto your show, because we know some of these people, so we're going to shame them.
Hit them up and just get the entry code. I want to do some more stuff with y'all too. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, this was really good. I think this is really fun. And thanks to Will for being, again, he's a brave guy. Thanks, the mobcast. But I think we should be. We have a job as well to mix up some of the entertainment for people in the Clojure world as well. We've got to try and do that a bit more and have a lot of fun. So it's been really great, Jordan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us and bringing the pretty lady as well onto the podcast.
Oh, where is she? Oh, she's sleeping. She's the best. I was like, oh, I'm a pretty lady. Oh, I mean, yes, my pretty lady.
That was almost awkward for a second there.
Right.
Oh shit! Yeah, I also I got to keep it sane.
Keep it professional. Family
exactly.
show.
Is Will the pretty lady? I thought Will's the pretty lady.
No, I put my pronouns at the beginning.
Yeah, it's true. I asked.
Fair enough.
Working on it.
But I think we even though we took over the bullshit what do you call it? Specialization, there is still cow dung, like there are other flavors that people can pick up and entertain people a lot. And I'd encourage you to talk to the folks. I think it is always a challenge. Like even I and Ray does that as well, trying to scout, quote unquote, scout for the people. Sometimes we need to encourage them, because sometimes they're like, maybe not, or there might be many reasons, right? As you said, when people there are humans behind it, and there might be many reasons that they can't make it.
Totally.
But yeah, so I'm pretty sure in the Clojure community, it is much, much easier for. That's what I noticed, because I'm also doing the Rust podcast. That's way harder to get anybody to get onto the podcast. Yeah. And also, I think it helps a little, because since we've been running the show since the dinosaurs were there, so we are like the
there's only so many people. That's the whole thing I was thinking about. Exactly. Is there's like there's only so many, like superstars.
Yeah, but come on, we're at number 74.
Exactly.
And, so I think there are more than that. There's a bit more breadth and depth in the Clojure script world. But I think, I think from the podcast perspective, I think we can do a bit like the conferences do. We should be more friendly towards each other. And I think this has been really good. I think we can all help each other out and, be part of this community too. We don't have to like compete for people to come on the show. Everyone can go on different shows, and there's different. I think you've got a really great personality and a really great way to talk to people. So I think everyone's going to really enjoy your show, and it's a different flavor than ours, like you say, and you're just a total star in my opinion. I'm going to be doing something different with you as well. So we're going to have another little project. We're not going to talk about it now. We just tease it a little bit.
All right. We'll tease it. So don't use the P word. You got to stop using the P word. I know what you mean by the P word now, but you got to stop using it.
What is the P word? Oh, yeah. Okay. I see. Yeah. Okay.
Politics. I feel like it's more like philosophy of technology. You get like, hey, can I ask you about politics? And everyone's like, no, God, no.
But I was teasing it by saying we're going to talk about the P word. It's like it's like the P tape. It's like we're going to. Maybe that's what we should call it, the P tape.
God damn it!
We're gonna pick up some of the branding.
Will, say goodbye to your job. You should just. Honestly, I shouldn't even tell people that you're still here. You'd be like, I am not associated with whatever that.
I left.
I'm not with them.
30 minutes ago.
Exactly.
This is that paid sponsorship end. This is like, welcome to Quip Toothbrush. Brush your teeth with quips and stuff. Yay, VMware. Like.
Anywho, on that bombshell, we're gonna start the dramatic piano, and then we say goodbye to each other now.
Oh.
Okay, bye.
Okay, no, that's not our theme. So that's our show. Will. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Jordan.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DefN. And the awesome vegetarian music, or the track, is Melon Hamburger by Pizzeri. And the show's audio is mixed by Wouter Dullert. I'm pretty sure I butchered his name. Maybe you should insert your own name here, Dullert.
Wouter?
If you'd like to support us, please do check out our Patreon page. And you can show your appreciation to all the hard work, or the lack of hard work that we're doing. And you can also catch up with either Ray, with me, for some unexplainable reason. You want to interact with us, then do check us out on Slack, Clojurian Slack, or Clojureverse, or on Zulip, or just at us at DefN Podcast on Twitter. Enjoy your day, and see you in the next episode.